Long before the rise of great empires, before the pyramids of Egypt touched the sky and before the philosophers of Greece began asking questions about life and death, there was a king whose story was carved into clay tablets in the ancient land of Mesopotamia. His name was Gilgamesh, ruler of the mighty city of Uruk. His legend would become one of the oldest stories humanity ever preserved, a story about power, friendship, fear, and the desperate search for immortality. Gilgamesh was not an ordinary king. Ancient storytellers described him as 2/3 divine and 1/3 human. His mother was the wise goddess Nin-sun, and from her he inherited extraordinary strength and intelligence. From his mortal father he inherited the limitations that bind all humans to the same destiny, death. Yet in the early years of his life, Gilgamesh did not think about that destiny at all. He ruled the city of Uruk with unmatched power. The city itself was magnificent, surrounded by enormous walls that stretched across the horizon. Temples rose above the streets, markets were filled with merchants and travelers, and the river nearby carried the lifeblood of the civilization that thrived there. Gilgamesh had helped build these mighty walls, and his strength was so great that people said no warrior could stand against him. But strength without wisdom can become something dangerous. As the years passed, Gilgamesh grew arrogant. He believed that his divine blood made him superior to every other human being. He pushed his people to work endlessly, forcing them to build greater monuments and larger temples. The citizens of Uruk admired his strength, yet they feared his temper and his pride. Many felt that their king had become a tyrant. Eventually the people cried out to the gods for help. They prayed for someone who could challenge Gilgamesh and humble his overwhelming power. The gods listened. From clay and wilderness they created a man unlike any other. His name was Enkidu. He was wild and powerful, covered with hair, living among the animals of the steppe. Gazelles ran beside him without fear, wolves slept near him as if he were one of their own. Enkidu knew nothing of cities or kings. He belonged to the untamed world beyond human civilization. Yet destiny was already guiding him toward Uruk. Hunters who wandered into the wilderness soon discovered the strange man who protected the animals and disrupted their traps. When word of this mysterious figure reached Gilgamesh, the king sensed that something unusual was happening. Advisors suggested a clever plan. A woman from the city was sent into the wilderness to approach Enkidu, to introduce him to the ways of human life. Through kindness and companionship, Enkidu slowly began to change. The animals that once accepted him now fled from his presence. He had become part of the human world. Eventually he traveled toward the city of Uruk, drawn by stories of the powerful king who ruled there. When Enkidu finally entered the city, the moment of confrontation arrived. The two powerful figures met in the streets of Uruk. Gilgamesh stood tall with the confidence of a king who had never known defeat. Enkidu, wild and fearless, refused to bow before him. Their clash shook the city. They fought with incredible strength, slamming against walls and pillars as crowds gathered to watch. Dust filled the air as the two giants struggled for dominance. Neither warrior could overcome the other. And then something unexpected happened. Instead of hatred, the two men began to respect each other. They recognized the same strength and courage within one another. The fight ended not with death, but with laughter and friendship. From that moment forward, Gilgamesh and Enkidu became inseparable companions. Together they sought glory beyond the walls of Uruk. Gilgamesh believed that great deeds were the only way a man could leave a permanent mark upon the world. If death eventually claimed every human life, then only legendary actions could keep a name alive forever. This belief led them toward their first great adventure. Far beyond the cities of Mesopotamia lay the mysterious cedar forest. The forest was said to contain enormous trees that towered into the sky, wood so valuable that kings dreamed of possessing it. Yet no human dared to enter the forest because it was guarded by a terrifying monster named Humbaba. Humbaba was no ordinary creature. The gods themselves had placed him there as the protector of the forest. His roar was said to shake mountains, and his presence filled the land with fear. When Gilgamesh announced his plan to challenge Humbaba, many in Uruk tried to stop him. They warned him that the guardian monster had never been defeated. But Gilgamesh was determined. Enkidu, despite knowing the dangers of the forest from his time in the wilderness, chose to stand beside his friend. Their journey was long and filled with tension. As they traveled across the land, Gilgamesh began experiencing strange dreams. In these dreams he saw falling mountains, thunderous storms, and powerful forces guiding his path. Enkidu interpreted the dreams as signs that the gods were watching their journey. Finally they reached the edge of the cedar forest. The air itself seemed heavy with ancient power. The trees rose like pillars supporting the sky, their shadows stretching across the ground. Somewhere deep within the forest, the monster Humbaba waited. When the guardian finally appeared, his presence was overwhelming. His face was terrifying, his voice thundered across the forest, and his anger shook the earth. For a moment even Gilgamesh felt fear. But he refused to retreat. With Enkidu beside him, he attacked the monstrous guardian. The battle was fierce and chaotic. Humbaba called upon the winds and storms to defend himself, but the two heroes continued fighting with relentless determination. Eventually they overcame the guardian. Humbaba begged for mercy, offering treasures and promises of loyalty. But Enkidu warned that the monster would never truly submit. Gilgamesh made a decision that would echo throughout the rest of his life. He struck the final blow. The guardian of the forest was dead. With Humbaba defeated, the two heroes cut down the sacred cedar trees and returned toward Uruk carrying their spoils and their growing legend. But their victory had consequences. When Gilgamesh returned to the city, his fame had spread across the lands. His strength and courage attracted the attention of the powerful goddess Ishtar. Ishtar was the goddess of love, beauty, and war. She approached Gilgamesh and proposed that he become her husband. Such an offer from a goddess should have been the greatest honor a mortal could receive. Yet Gilgamesh refused. He reminded Ishtar of the tragic fate of her previous lovers, many of whom had suffered terrible punishments after earning her affection. His words were harsh and humiliating. Ishtar's anger exploded. She went before the gods and demanded revenge. She asked for the release of a terrifying creature known as the Bull of Heaven. The bull descended from the heavens with unstoppable fury. Its hooves shattered the earth, creating massive cracks in the ground. Crops were destroyed, and hundreds of people died as chaos spread across the land. Once again Gilgamesh and Enkidu stood together. They confronted the monstrous bull in a battle that shook the city. The creature's strength was enormous, but the two heroes worked together with perfect unity. At last they killed the Bull of Heaven. Their victory was celebrated across Uruk, but the gods were no longer pleased. By killing both Humbaba and the Bull of Heaven, Gilgamesh and Enkidu had challenged divine authority. The gods gathered to decide what punishment should be given. They reached a devastating conclusion. Enkidu would die. Soon after the decision was made, Enkidu began to fall ill. His powerful body weakened day by day. He suffered terrible dreams and growing pain. Gilgamesh stayed beside his friend, refusing to believe that such a warrior could be defeated by sickness. But the illness grew worse. One day Enkidu closed his eyes and never opened them again. The death of his friend shattered Gilgamesh. For the first time in his life he truly understood the terrifying truth that waits for every human being. Death. If Enkidu could die, then one day Gilgamesh would die as well. This realization filled him with dread. He could not accept the idea that all his strength, power, and achievements would eventually vanish into nothingness. Driven by desperation, Gilgamesh abandoned his throne and began a journey unlike any other. He would search for the secret of immortality. Across deserts and mountains he traveled, asking every wise person he encountered the same question: how can a man escape death? Eventually he learned about a mysterious figure named Utnapishtim. According to ancient legend, Utnapishtim had survived a great flood sent by the gods to destroy humanity. Because of his survival, the gods had granted him eternal life. If anyone knew the secret of immortality, it was him. Gilgamesh crossed dangerous lands to reach the place where Utnapishtim lived, beyond the edges of the known world. When he finally arrived, he begged the immortal man to reveal the secret of eternal life. Utnapishtim listened quietly before answering. He explained that immortality was not meant for humans. The gods had given it only once, and they would never give it again. Yet Gilgamesh refused to accept this answer. So Utnapishtim challenged him. If Gilgamesh could remain awake for 6 days and 7 nights, he might prove himself worthy of learning the secret of eternal life. But exhaustion quickly overcame him. He fell asleep almost immediately. The test was over. Yet before Gilgamesh returned home, Utnapishtim revealed one final secret. At the bottom of a deep sea grew a magical plant that could restore youth. Hope returned to Gilgamesh's heart. He dove into the depths and retrieved the plant, believing that he had finally found a way to defeat death. But fate had one final lesson waiting for him. While resting during his journey home, Gilgamesh placed the plant beside him. A snake silently approached, smelled the plant, and stole it away before disappearing into the grass. In that moment, Gilgamesh realized the truth he had been running from. Immortality was not meant for him. Defeated and exhausted, he returned to the city of Uruk. Standing before the great walls he had built long ago, he looked upon the city with new understanding. Human life is temporary. But the things people create, the friendships they form, and the stories they leave behind can last far longer than any single lifetime. Gilgamesh did not become immortal. But his story did. Thousands of years later, his legend continues to remind humanity of the same question he once asked himself. If death is unavoidable, how should we choose to live before it arrives?